Alright guys, welcome back. GM Light here. Today we're going to be talking about what was supposed to be the final chapter of Saw 7. And although this is a little bit of a step down from Saw 6, there's still a lot I like about it, so let's get into the premise. Saw 7's about when a fierce battle rages over Jigsaw's terrible legacy. Survivors seek support from a fellow survivor and self-help guru who has a few dark secrets of his own. Meanwhile, crooked cop Hoffman seeks revenge against Jigsaw's wife and an author who has his own story. So like I said, I think that this is a bit of a step down from Saw 6. I don't think that it's as well written or intelligent as it, but it's still, I think, quite a bit above 4 and 5. It definitely has a lot more highs than 4 and 5, and there's a lot more that I like about it. But I do have a fair bit of criticism towards this movie, so we'll get into the good and the bad and, air all that stuff out. And then just getting into the good, I like that we finally get to see kind of what happened to Gordon after the first movie. We get a little bit of that in the first scene, then they follow up with a little bit later, and just figuring out what really happened to him, where he's been all these years, what he's been up to. Even though he only has a couple scenes in the movie, it's still nice to actually know what happened. Because with all the other characters in the franchise, we at least kind of know what happened to them or know their fates, but with Dr. Gordon, we never really knew that. And also too, since this was intended to be the last movie, for those purposes, the opening game or trap is an absolute banger, definitely a crazy ass trap. And although it doesn't entirely work for me on a story level, I think just the concept overall, very badass, very over the top. I love the idea of like having one that's in public that no one can really do anything about, and then everybody just has to watch. It's the type of stuff that definitely is finale material. And then also getting deeper into the story, even though this movie was intended to be the final movie, I don't want to go too much into this negative because I'll talk about it later, but even though, they're doing this supposed finale story, I don't think that the story really lends itself to be a finale, because it's kind of just another Saw story, but as a Saw story about this guy who pretended to be a victim of Jigsaw, and now he's being tested because he's made a lot of money off of it and because he lied. I really like that concept, and I like the idea of this guy having to be put to the test and reenact the things that he said happened to him. It's just a really strong setup, makes for a great game with all these people that helped him lie and make a profit off of this. It also feels like something that would realistically happen if this were the situation in the real world. Crimes like this, you're always going to have people who do shit like this, exploit it, use it for their own gain, and the fact that this is the type of character that we're putting in a game, I just think works so well. It's able to build a believable premise where this guy did something pretty rotten and maybe it's forgivable on some level. You still want him to kind of survive. You definitely don't want him to die a horrific death, even though he is kind of scummy and lied and stuff. At the same time though, it's a little bit satisfying to see him get brought down a peg after, he kind of condescendingly treats all these other Saw survivors, and after he's just very obviously spewing lies. It overall just makes for a good main game, and it probably could have been fit into any Saw movie. It doesn't necessarily lend itself to being a finale type story. It's still very strong on its own. I also like some of the stuff that they did to try and make it feel like a finale, even though I think that some of the finale stuff was a bit of a rush job. I like the Easter eggs, like how in the support group you kind of see some of the other survivors from other Saw movies, like the rich kid from Saw 5 and like some of the characters from Saw 6, like the mother and stuff. I guess Roderick went to jail and that's why he didn't show up, but hey, it just gives it that level of interconnectivity, and that, all these things happen in the same world, just kind of tying it all together works out for me well. And it feels a bit rewarding kind of just as an Easter egg for people who've watched the whole franchise. But even then, getting past the setup, past the Easter eggs and stuff, the main game I think is very good and has some very visceral scenes and traps. Some of the nastier stuff, I will say, in this franchise, especially the one with the sound where he has to pull the key out, and then whenever she screams the bars get closer to her neck, that's very cringy. Him having to pull out his teeth to get the numbers, brutal. And then the pipes going towards her while he has to lift with the blades digging into him, just great Saw stuff. And then the results are absolutely disgusting. It seemed like because they were intending on this being the last movie, that maybe they were trying to make the traps more visceral, disgusting, trying to up themselves before they go out with a bang. But at the same time, besides a couple scenes, I could also see this movie being shot not intending for it to be the Saw finale, and then them adding Dr. Gordon and some of the other stuff to kind of tie it in as a finale. But then moving on to Jigsaw, you also get some good scenes with him. And besides that goofy, very notorious scene of him walking into the bookshop with the backwards hat, I think the scene plays out well in general with that, where he confronts Bobby for being a liar. I like how he is very cryptic and he kind of uses phrases and he speaks pretty mysteriously in order to kind of just subtly let him know that he knows he's lying. I really like stuff like that, and his delivery is always just especially good. Tobin Bell's played this character down with expert craft at this point, so he's, whatever you give him, he's going to eat it up. He's going to do a great job delivering those lines. And I think that the confrontation's an especially interesting one by the nature of what this guy is doing. This isn't my favorite Saw movie, but I will just say it's very entertaining. If nothing else, it has a very quick-paced structure. It's very entertaining. I'm never bored during this movie, that's for sure. Some things don't work for me, and that's okay, because, you know, whenever I sit down, I still find myself very much engaged with the story. I don't find myself bored like I do with some of 4 and a lot of 5, so I can't complain too much. And with that, for my final positive, even though there's a lot that kind of makes this disappointing as what was supposed to be a finale, it's also great to finally see the reverse bear trap finally get used on somebody, because, you know, the other times they're able to escape it, so now we finally actually see the carnage of what this reverse bear trap can do. It's pretty satisfying to see as, you know, something that happens towards the end of the finale. But now getting into the bad, because I do have some negative things to say about this movie, and most of it's stuff where it's nitpicky or stuff that I could overlook, and even things that I think that are fine in retrospect with the fact that the series did end up keeping on and not just completely end with this. But a lot of the dangling plot threads that this last movie leaves don't really get answered, so at the same time I can't give it too much credit. And to begin with, you know, one of my first positives that I said about this movie is also, I think, a double-edged sword. The Gordon setup feels very wasted in my opinion. I wish that they didn't set it up to be like kind of a big comeback of his character, only for them to basically spoil the fact that, spoilers, he's an apprentice, and it's pretty obvious from the get-go when he shows up in that one scene in the support group that he is definitely an apprentice. I think that was pretty obvious to begin with once you see him show up. I wish that they played it like a bit more mysteriously. I wish that you didn't know that he was an apprentice and he was more of an actual factor in the story, so that when he is revealed to be an apprentice, it would hit home. You spend a whole nother movie with him not knowing that he is, but they really don't do much legwork, and this is why I'm saying I feel like this could have been some kind of weird finale reshoot after the fact, where they had the story initially set and then they filmed 2 or 3 scenes with Cary Elwes as Dr. Gordon. Basically just have that one setup of him in the support group and then have him at the end of the movie as the twist villain. It's a little lazy. They don't really earn that at all. And I like the explanation that he was the mastermind surgeon behind all of these more creative traps that involve human anatomy throughout the series, but it doesn't entirely make sense to me though, and they do not set it up at all. And by that I mean they gave one scene where he was creepy, and then it was pretty obvious from there that it would be him. It just doesn't feel like they put in any actual work into this being a reveal that works, and it felt kind of cheap that they would just set it up pretty lazily and then just to drop it on us. I just wish too that he was more integral to the plot. I think that would have worked a lot better, you know, with the sense of this being a finale. If he was actually a part of the story the whole time, it would work a lot more in its favor. Bringing back the original survivor, have him be through the entire movie as at least some kind of cog in the machine. I'm not exactly sure how it would work, but I'm sure that there's a way to make that work or make it better. Kind of do what they did with Amanda in the second movie maybe. But I guess though, with the plot that they were telling with this fake jigsaw survivor, it wouldn't have made any sense. But I just can't help but feel like there's a better version of this out there where they did actually use him as part of the plot and it felt a lot more like a finale. Because that's really my main problem with this movie. It doesn't feel like a finale almost at all. There's just a few things that feel like they're a little more standout. It's a little bit more of a special Saw movie, but nothing about it really screams finale to me. And then it also doesn't help that they left it off on a pretty big dangling plot thread cliffhanger, and then you have all these other apprentices that accompany Dr. Gordon, and we're never going to understand how big this really goes, how big this runs, how many people are involved. If Dr. Gordon has other apprentices with him, how deep does this go? And if you're intending this to be the last movie, why would you set that stuff up? It just doesn't make sense to me, and it's a little bit infuriating. This is also probably the Saw movie with the highest amount of bad actors and bad acting. There's just a lot of misses, and especially that one detective that's kind of investigating things with Jill Tuck. He's god awful in this movie. He's just such a bad actor. I'm honestly kind of astonished that he made it through whatever process they made it through with him. I just can't picture some of the line delivery with him and the director being like, yeah, you know what, that's a good cut, let's use that one. It doesn't jive with me. So that's kind of a disappointment, especially because this is the last movie and is supposed to have a level of importance to it. And going back to just the overall things, I don't know why they're introducing characters like him, all these new characters. They probably should have spent more time just patching things up and concluding all these overarching threads that have led through the entire series. No, I'm still captivated by the main game, but when you bring in these new characters and stuff in the last movie and try and get us to care about them, it kind of backfires because they should be using this last movie to tie up all those plot threads, especially because it was supposed to feel like a finale. That's why, and again, it doesn't work. And that would be okay if they actually gave Jill, Tuck, and Hoffman something to do, but it feels like they don't really give either of them anything to do except just small shots of Jill Tuck kind of hiding from Hoffman, Hoffman kind of sending videos and threatening her. There's really not a whole lot to what either of them actually actively do throughout the movie. I'd even go as far as to say Jill spends the majority of the runtime of the movie sitting in protective custody in a jail cell. Just all this to say, these things don't work for me. They don't work as a final movie. It seems like sometimes just they have their focus in the wrong place, and they should have really locked this shit down, especially if they actually wanted this to be a final movie from the start. And although I really like the plot line of the main game, it could have fit into any other Saw movie. This doesn't feel like it is a finale type plot line. Kind of reminds me of Halloween Ends, where I like Halloween Ends, but it just doesn't feel like it works at all as a finale. Halloween Ends is terrible as Halloween Ends, but I think that it would be great as an anecdotal random Halloween movie that's trying something different. If this was just a plot thrown into Saw 6 or something, or Saw 5, I think that it would probably be one of the more standout Saw movies that I'd enjoy more, but because it has this connotation attached to it of being the final movie, it just kind of weighs things down and takes it in a direction that I wish that they didn't as a final movie. But overall, I think that a lot of my gripes kind of get undermined by the fact that this isn't the last Saw movie, especially if Saw X kind of acts as a retroactive finale to this character and to this world in general, and that works better, especially because you get Saw in real time live in that movie. That could fix some of my gripes here, but just not enough explanation, nothing building to this actually feeling like a finale. And although it's a very entertaining movie and I enjoy most of what's going on a pure story level, I disagree with a lot of their choices. It's a lot of the same shit that I'm accustomed to from the series, and it's shit I like. It's shit that's very watchable to me and I enjoy watching. Is it the finale though? No, it doesn't feel like it. But it still has high entertainment value, and it's one last classic Saw movie to end this original string of movies before they reboot and restart the franchise a couple times 7 years later. So Saw 7, the final chapter. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm GM Light. Have a good one.